The Clarksville City Council is now called to order. Chaplain of the day is Councilman Burkhart, and our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Councilman Richmond. Please stand if you're able, Councilman Burkhart, and then Councilman Richmond.
Let's pray. Father in heaven, again, we come before thee, thanking thee for this day and all our many blessings. Father, as we conduct the business of the city, we ask that you be with each and every one of us, that may the decisions we make be for the good of every citizen of Clarksville. Father, be with our troops, domestic and abroad. Father, keep them out of harm's way. Father, be with our country as we go through a little strife and some different ailments. Please be with us. And we know, Father, the only way is through you. Be with us, forgive us of our sins. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Councilman Burkhart and Councilman Richmond. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Garrett,
Present.
Mr. Richmond,
Present.
Mr. Erb,
Present.
Mr. Chandler,
Present.
Ms. Guzman,
Present.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Mr. Holloman,
Present.
Mr. Allen,
Present.
Mr. Henley,
Here.
Ms. Streetman,
Here.
Mr. Norris,
Here.
Mr. Burkhart, Mayor Pitts.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the electronic meeting. A motion would be in order to comply with the technical aspects of the governor's executive order regarding holding open meetings in a forum other than in public and in the open and in public. This governing body determines that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens due to the COVID-19 outbreak. I would entertain a motion and a second.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Burkhart, seconded by Councilman Henley, I believe. Any questions? We'll do this by voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no.
Aye.
Motion passes and it is adopted. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now on the public hearing for our fiscal year 21 budget, and no one has registered to speak. So we will proceed with the first reading of the various ordinances that make up our fiscal year 21 budget. First item on our agenda is Ordinance 83, 2019-20, amending the fiscal year 20 budget and approving the fiscal year 21 operating budget for the Central Business Improvement District. Unless anyone is presenting that, I will ask for a motion and a second to get it properly before us.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion been made and properly seconded for Ordinance 83. This is requiring no city funds. The CBID does have remaining city funds that they will be using for this current year. If there are questions from council, I'll entertain those right now. Anybody have any questions? Seeing none, are you ready to vote? Okay, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Garrett,
Aye.
Mr. Richmond,
Aye.
Mr. Erb,
Aye.
Mr. Chandler,
Aye.
Ms. Guzman,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Holloman,
Aye.
Mr. Allen,
Aye.
Mr. Henley,
Aye.
Ms. Streetman,
Aye.
Mr. Norris,
Aye.
Mr. Burkhart,
Aye.
Mayor Pitts.
Aye.
13 yes.
Ordinance 83 is adopted. First reading. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Next item on our agenda is Ordinance 84, 2019-20, amending the operating and capital budget for fiscal year 20 and adopting the operating and capital budget for fiscal year 21 for CDE light band. I would entertain a motion and a second.
Motion to approve.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. Are there any questions about the Ordinance 84? Councilman Burkhart, you are recognized.
Mayor, I believe I have a amendment to this budget. Want to amend the it's the, I'm not sure exactly, it's Ordinance 84, 2019-20. FY other revenue from $9,160,000 to $11,160,000. from 34,375,392 to 36,379. And I'm gonna pat. Does everybody have these? Oh, okay, I thought everybody.
If you'll pass those around and give us a moment to look at it, we will, first, you made that in the form of a motion, Councilman
I make
Burkhart?
that as a motion, yes, sir.
Okay, would need a second to get that properly before us. Thank you, Councilman Garrett. Now, if we'll distribute the papers and then
And
kind of walk us through that.
if anybody has any questions, Ms. Mata, I think can explain, do some better, I know some better explaining than I can on this. If I'm not mistaken, this was the one that had the typo on it. I think we either added a zero or deleted a zero, I think, in a budget line.
Okay, I think this is, as Councilman Burkhart just said, correcting a typographical error. Pardon? Yeah, fat fingers and,
Wasn't me, though.
as long as it works for you. Okay, are there any questions about the amendment?
Mayor,
Seeing-
can he tell us, I have something to just ask, what is he speaking about? I know he says something about from 116,000 to.
Yeah.
What this budget is he referring to?
Okay, thank you, Council Lady Smith. We're talking about the CDE light band budget. There's an amendment proposed to correct a typographical error. So I'll call on Councilman Burkhart again to kind of walk us through what those numbers are.
Thank you, Mayor.
And the numbers, it's other revenue from 9,160,000 to 11,160,000. And I think that, and then for FY21 operating from 34,379,392 to 36,379,392. So we had a number wrong and then we added a zero there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady Smith. Councilman Henley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. Ms. Mott or Mr. Burkhart may be able to help me out with it. What is other revenue? Is it a lot of things? I mean,
I will take a shot at it.
Well, the reason I'm curious is, you look at 19 and we had 830,000 and now all of a sudden we're projecting 11 million. So I'm just curious about what's going on there.
Yeah, we've got Brian Taylor. If you'd like, we can go out of session just briefly and hear from Mr. Taylor if you'd like.
Yeah, just a quick
Okay.
explanation would be
All
helpful.
right, without objection, we will go in out of session. Mr. Taylor, are you on the line? Brian Taylor, are you on the line?
He is, Mayor, but I don't think his mic is on. It don't show his mic is on. He's unmuted.
Brian Taylor or David Johns, are you on the line?
Mayor, it shows that he's joined, but his mic is still off.
Brian Taylor or David Johns or anybody at CDE?
The microphone.
Okay, anybody?
Yes, this is Brian.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Councilman Henley had a question. Councilman Henley, you want to ask the question again?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mr. Taylor, I was just curious,
Good question. I had
what
trouble
all
getting
is
my
in.
mic off, but David's helped me use his phone here.
Brian, you're live here. Are you there? We'll get this technology in a minute.
All right.
Brian, are you there?
All right, we're having microphone problems here, Mayor. Hold on a second.
Can you hear us? Brian Taylor, can you hear us?
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay, all right. Councilman Henley has a question. I'm going to let him ask the question, then you can answer. Councilman Henley.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Taylor, it was just real quick. We're doing this budget amendment for the other revenue, and it's going from 9 million to 11 million. I was just curious what all that was comprised of, because if you look back to the fiscal year 19, we only had 832,000 there. So I'm kind of curious what the change was, and then how you guys came up with the additional 2 million projection, I guess, for the budget.
Yeah, actually, the difference is we did a typo on what we submitted to Lori to put in the ordinance. And so we were matching the numbers that our board approved. So we needed to make sure that what we presented to the city council matched what our power board approved. And we just had some typos in there. We're not changing any projections or anything of that sort, strictly cleaning up those typos.
And I believe he's asking what this is.
Yeah.
It's broadband.
And if you look at the difference in that money, what that the other revenue is really our coming from broadband.
Mr. Taylor, Brian,
He's coming out.
we can't hear you, Brian. You're gonna,
All right, can you hear me now?
got it.
Yes.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, that the other revenue is our broadband revenue.
The other revenue is your broadband revenue, you said.
Money from broadband.
Okay.
Money that broadband
Oh.
pays electric.
Money that broadband pays electric.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
I'm sorry.
Does any other council member have a question of Mr. Taylor while we have him on the line?
I have a question, Mayor.
Council Lady Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Taylor, what y'all in the black when it comes to your revenue for broadband? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. We are in the black and profitable on the broadband division.
Is that had to do with the COVID-19 episode?
No, ma'am. It's just over the years as we continue to grow our customer base and get additional customers, and we've actually moved into the commercial side of the business and commercial telephone. That really just because of the number of customers we have and the success of our marketing efforts, we are now in the black.
So are you talking about in the black in a decrease? Are you
No,
talking in the west?
Now that means that we're no longer at a deficit balance. We're actually making a net profit on broadband.
Oh, okay.
So it's
Okay.
a good thing.
That's a good thing. Okay. Okay. And then I have another question. When will the building be finished and how much did that cost? I didn't see that in here.
The building, hopefully we finished part of the building. We should have most of the building finished by October. And we have moved into part of the renovation, but we still have had to move out of some of the building before we could finish the renovations. And I don't remember, what was the numbers that we spent on the building?
In this fiscal year, it's $8 million.
Yeah, in the building, it was about $8 million on the building renovations.
Is the expansion going to accommodate better services for the customers?
Yes, ma'am, it is. We have actually increased the size of our lobby area, so we're able to have one lobby instead of two lobbies, which I think will be much better for the customers that come in. We also have a true call center built into it, so that that customer a little bit better for answering the phone calls. And we've actually extended our call center an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon. Our call center is actually open now from 7 to 7.
So when we get a call, and it's just a question because I know that there's been problems, complaints about nothing bad. I'm just saying when there's let's say for the outage we had, you could never get through on the line. Nobody answers, so it's been an ongoing problem. And I hope that this $8 million was part of fixing up that true call center.
Yes, ma'am.
I hope
Yes.
that it is better service, better service, and also the drop box. We're asking citizens are designed to see a drop box for the elderly who cannot work that one machine, which is always usually messed up when you go to pay. I've experienced it as well during the COVID virus when we were shut down out there. Everybody's trying to use that one machine. It look like we need to upgrade to bring in like 4 or 5 more machines so people can pay their bills. But we do service a lot of people. It's kind of like a hassle, It's a hassle.
Yes, ma'am. We have multiple ways customers can pay their bill. They can pay online. They can pay through the phone system. We have 5 locations, but we have those kiosk machines that they can pay. We have several drop-off centers that they can pay. And with this new addition to our building, we actually added 2 additional payment kiosks that are open late evenings. So you're right, we needed more than just one at our building, and we've added 2 more to the building.
Oh, okay, that sounds good. That sounds better. All right. Thank
We're
you.
trying.
I see. Good work. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council Lady Smith, do you have any other questions?
No, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Any other council members have a question of Mr. Taylor? Seeing none, thank you. We'll go back into regular session. We are on the amendment to CDE budget. Any questions about the amendment? Hearing none, are you ready to vote on the amendment? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Garrett.
Aye.
Mr. Richmond.
Aye.
Mr. Erb.
Aye.
Mr. Chandler.
Aye.
Ms. Guzman.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Holloman.
Aye.
Mr. Allen.
Aye.
Mr. Henley.
Aye.
Ms. Streetman.
Aye.
Mr. Norris.
Aye.
Mr. Burkhart. Mayor Pitts.
Aye.
13 yes.
Amendment is adopted. We are now on the budget ordinance for CDE light band as amended. Any questions about this ordinance? Seeing none, are you ready to vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Garrett.
Aye.
Mr. Richmond.
Aye.
Mr. Erb.
Aye.
Mr. Chandler.
Aye.
Ms. Guzman.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Holloman.
Aye.
Mr. Allen.
Aye.
Mr. Henley.
Aye.
Ms. Streetman.
Aye.
Mr. Norris. Mr. Burkhart. Mayor Pitts.
Aye.
13 yes.
Ordinance 84 is adopted, first reading. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Next item on our agenda is Ordinance 85, 2019-20, amending the operating and capital budget for fiscal year 20 and adopting the operating and capital budget for fiscal year 21 for Clarksville Transit System. And I will entertain a motion in a second. Motion's been made and properly seconded. Are there any questions about the CTS operating budget and budget amendment?
No, I'd just like to make a comment, Mayor.
All right, you are recognized, Chair Lady Smith.
Thank you, sir. I just want to commend the Transportation Department, Mr. Nelson, for, as I said again, I can't thank them enough for putting in for that grant, that $5 million that we received during this COVID virus pandemic. And we thank them for looking out for the department and making sure that people still have transportation to ride by. We thank you because it's a very important system that we need. We need transportation here. And I'm so glad we have this bus system and that the elderly and youth are able to ride as needed. It is a need. And I thank Mr. Nelson and his staff for a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lady Smith. Well said. Any other questions or comments about Ordinance 85? Are you ready to vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Garrett.
Aye.
Mr. Richmond.
Aye.
Mr. Erb.
Aye.
Mr. Chandler.
Aye.
Ms. Guzman.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Holloman.
Aye.
Mr. Allen.
Aye.
Mr. Henley.
Aye.
Ms. Streetman.
Aye.
Mr. Norris.
Aye.
Mr. Burkhart. Mayor Pitts.
Aye.
13 yes.
Ordinance 85 is amended, is adopted, first reading. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Next item on our agenda is item number 4, Ordinance 86, 2019-20, amending the operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 20 and adopting the operating and capital budget for fiscal year 21 for Clarksville Gas and Water Department. I would need a motion and a second.
Motion for approval.
Second.
Motion been made and properly seconded for Ordinance 86. Are any amendments? Do we have any amendments? We have no amendments. Any questions about the budget Ordinance 86 for Clarksville Gas and Water Department? Hearing none, are you ready to vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Garrett.
Aye.
Mr. Richmond.
Aye.
Mr. Erb.
Aye.
Mr. Chandler.
Aye.
Ms. Guzman.
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Holloman.
Aye.
Mr. Allen? Mr. Henley? Ms. Streetman? Mr. Norris? Mr. Burkhart? Mayor Pitts?
Aye.
13 yes.
Ordinance 86 is adopted. First reading. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Next, we are on item number 5, Ordinance 87, 2019-20, amending the fiscal year 20 budget and approving the fiscal year 21 annual action plan and budget, and authorizing application for community development block grant and home investment partnership funds. I will entertain a motion and a second.
I move that we make a motion to accept this ordinance.
Thank you, Councilwoman Smith, and seconded by Councilman Henley. Thank you. I believe there's an amendment. Chairman Allen? All right, we'll call on you for the amendment.
Thank you. I passed out copies to everyone. It's to amend the FY20 revenue and expenses. As noted below, this will allow the budget ordinance to include an additional grant we've been awarded, $600,941 additional CDBG allocation for the COVID-19 through CARES Act. These are multi-year funds, so any unspent funds in FY fiscal year 20 will be appropriated in fiscal year 21. And so the grant revenue moves it up from $1,089,380 to $2,390,390. $390,320. And you have a copy in front of you, so if you have any questions, I will try to answer them.
Okay, we need a motion for this amendment. Motion made by Chairman Allen, seconded.
Second.
Thank you,
Second.
Councilman Henley. Any questions about the amendment? The amendment simply deals with the additional funds we receive through the CARES Act, federal money. Any questions about the amendment? Are you ready to vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Garrett?
Aye.
Mr. Richmond?
Aye.
Mr. Erb?
Aye.
Mr. Chandler?
Aye.
Ms. Guzman?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Holloman?
Aye.
Mr. Allen?
Aye.
Mr. Henley?
Aye.
Ms. Streetman?
Aye.
Mr. Norris?
Aye.
Mr. Burkhart? Mayor Pitts?
Aye.
13 yes.
Amendment to Ordinance 87 is adopted. We are now on Ordinance 87 as amended. Are there any questions about Ordinance 87? Seeing none, are you ready to vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Garrett?
Aye.
Mr. Richmond?
Aye.
Mr. Erb?
Aye.
Mr. Chandler?
Aye.
Ms. Guzman?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Holloman?
Aye.
Mr. Allen?
Aye.
Mr. Henley? Ms. Streetman? Mr. Norris?
Aye.
Mr. Burkhart? Mayor Pitts?
Aye.
13 yes.
Ordinance 87 is adopted. First reading. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We are now on number 6, Ordinance 88, 2019-20, amending the fiscal year 20 operating budget and adopting the fiscal year 21 operating budget for the Internal Service Fund. I would assume there's no amendments for this ordinance. I would entertain a motion for approval.
I move, we make a motion for approval of ordinance, is it 88?
88.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for that motion, and it's been properly seconded. Any questions about Ordinance 88? Hearing none, are you ready to vote? All right, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Garrett?
Aye.
Mr. Richmond?
Aye.
Mr. Erb?
Aye.
Mr. Chandler?
Aye.
Ms. Guzman?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Holloman?
Aye.
Mr. Allen?
Aye.
Mr. Henley? Ms. Streetman? Mr. Norris? Mr. Burkhart? Mayor Pitts?
Aye.
13 yes.
Ordinance 88 is adopted. First reading. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Next on our agenda is item 7, Ordinance 89, 2019-20, amending the fiscal year 20 budget and establishing the operating budget for the fiscal year 21 for the Clarksville Parking Commission. I need a motion and a second to get it properly before us.
I make a motion.
Thank you, Councilwoman
Second.
Guzman, and thank you for the second, Councilman Holloman. Any questions about Ordinance 89? Are you ready to vote? Sounds like you are. Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Garrett?
Aye.
Mr. Richmond?
Aye.
Mr. Erb?
Aye.
Mr. Chandler?
Aye.
Ms. Guzman?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Holloman?
Aye.
Mr. Allen?
Aye.
Mr. Henley? Ms. Streetman?
Aye.
Mr. Norris?
Aye.
Mr. Burkhart?
Aye.
Mayor Pitts?
Aye.
13 yes.
Ordinance 89 is adopted. First reading. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Item 8, Ordinance 90, 2019-20, amending the City of Clarksville operating and capital budget for fiscal year 20 and adopting the operating and capital budget for fiscal year 21 for the City of Clarksville governmental funds and adopting the tax rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020 and ending June 30th, 2020. I will entertain a motion and a second. Motion been made and properly seconded for Ordinance 90. I believe we have an amendment. I will call Councilman Burkhart. You wish to be recognized?
Yes, sir. I'm passing it around.
Okay.
And what this is, while it's going around, this is for the HR department. This will be 2 full-time employees. They'll actually be housed at Gas and Water. There's no difference in the bottom line of City General. What these will be a loss prevention officer and an HR analyst at Gas and Water out on Madison Street. There will be employees of the HR department. However, they will be paid for by ratepayer money through the Gas and Water department. So there will be no tax dollars here. This is simply a Gas and Water in-house, but they will be under the HR department in the City General. That's why we're amending this budget, and we didn't amend the Clarksville Gas and Water budget.
Okay, we would need a motion and a second to consider this amendment.
So,
Motion been made and properly seconded. Now the amendment is before us. Are there any questions about what we're doing here with this amendment?
Yeah, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am. Council Lady Smith, you're
I don't think
recognized.
I quite heard what he said. Is this tax rate for the fiscal year, what is this for? Gas and water, you said? I'm sorry.
I will call on Councilman Burkhart to explain the amendment again.
It is
Okay.
simply putting a loss prevention officer and a HR analyst inside the Gas and Water department, paid for by ratepayer money. However, they will be under the direction of the HR department. So they will be employees of the HR department through City General. However, they will be paid for out of Gas and Water ratepayer money. So no money to the bottom line, no taxpayer money.
Council Lady
So
Smith?
is this gonna be a tax hike on our gas and water? Is that what you're saying?
No, ma'am. It's not dealing with the tax rate. It's merely adding 2 employees in City General that will be paid for 100% by Gas and Water. And because they are ratepayer funded, we have to specify that it is ratepayer funds from Gas and Water that's paying for these 2 positions.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand it, Mayor.
I got it.
All
I
right,
understand.
Thank you.
Good question. Anything else, Council Lady Smith?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilman Henley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to clarify, this is 2 extra employees.
2 extra employees within City General,
Okay.
paid for 100% by Gas and Water.
All right, thank you.
Gas and Water has grown to the point where they need an HR analyst to help them. And then there's a loss prevention officer because they do handle a lot of money and have a lot of traffic through their buildings.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Henley. Any other questions? Councilman Burkhart, I'm sorry, you're
And
recognized.
let me give a total. It's $136,480 for the 2 employees. That includes everything, benefits, the whole package.
The whole thing, okay. We've got that out there. Any questions about this amendment? Hearing none, are you ready to vote? I believe you are. Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Garrett?
Aye.
Mr. Richmond?
Aye.
Mr. Erb?
Aye.
Mr. Chandler?
Aye.
Ms. Guzman? Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Holloman?
Aye.
Mr. Allen?
Aye.
Mr. Henley?
Aye.
Ms. Streetman?
Aye.
Mr. Norris?
Aye.
Mr. Burkhart?
Aye.
Mayor Pitts?
Aye.
13 yes.
Amendment is adopted. Thank you. I think the next amendment had Chairman Allen. Councilman Allen, you're recognized.
Yes. I'll pass you out a copy. I think I gave you a copy Thursday. Oh, yeah, Thursday. And you have a copy again in front of you. Looking to amend the HRC's budget from 2,500 to 125,000. Our HRC department, they do a lot of good work, and there are so many things that they could do. But limited incomes, there's not much. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I get a second? I'm sorry, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. I was asleep over here. All right, we've had a motion and a second. Now, proceed, sir.
All right. The HRC it's kind of like an overlooked little department, but they can do so much. Most major cities have a HRC. As a matter of fact, the county hired a full-time diversity officer just to deal with those types of things. I think as a city, we are lacking, we're behind. And I don't know if you've ever been to the site to look at the goals and the plans and what the HRC does. And what they do, it really fits in with the climate and what's going on today and what this city needs and what people are crying out for. I know many of you have received emails. This is not a small thing. This is a big thing. We are a diverse city, and I feel that with the budget that was presented and the programs that they want to offer, the trainings and so forth, I think it's something that we certainly need. Even down through the years, I've been thinking we needed it. Kind of been fighting this battle like a long time because it's been in place a while, and since I've been here, and some have asked for even a full-time position. But right now, in this budget, she only has a part-time position, but you can kind of grow to that. But as you can see, all the events and trainings that they have scheduled and they would like to do, I think it's very beneficial. This is a big bang for our buck, if you will. I think the city will benefit from it. We all embrace diversity, and the key to it is education. We have to be educated. We have to understand each other. Our city is a diverse city, very diverse. We have people from all walks of life here in Clarksville, and that's what makes us special. That's what makes us the #1 city in the country. And so I have the budget here, and I will entertain any questions.
Okay, you have before you an amendment to the general fund budget of $125,000. I think you said, Councilman Allen, this is what you distributed
Yes.
on Monday at our workshop.
Yes.
I think there was a math error in that. It's not a total of 125, it's a total of 104 after I added the numbers up.
Okay.
But
Is there a math error?
so it would be for 104,000 versus 125 without removing any of the items.
104.
104.
Sorry, Mayor.
No, it's okay. That
Now,
happens.
do I
Mayor, point of order.
Okay, yes, sir, Councilman Chandler, you're recognized for the point of order.
Mayor, is there any way that his amendment can be put up on the screen?
The question is, Ms. Wilson, can we put amendments on the screen? Can't get it to Google Meets, Councilman Chandler. This is first reading. I think it was distributed ahead of time, Madam Clerk, in the packet. Can you access that, Councilman Chandler?
Excuse me?
Can you access the packet from your computer?
The amendments did not go out.
The amendments did not go out? Okay. This is first reading. We'll get another bite next week, so we'll consider this amendment. I apologize for that. Councilman Chandler?
Okay, so my understanding is that his amendment is in our packet.
The amendment is not in your packet, sir. I apologize. It is not in your packet.
Okay.
It was distributed on Monday, and I don't think you were here either, on Monday.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Chandler. Any other questions of the council about this amendment? Councilman Erb, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I got a question. Freedom Point and Wilma Rudolph Event Center are both city assets. And so there should be no cost to them for those two assets. Is that correct?
That is correct. And Councilman Erb, thank you, because this kind of brings me to a point, Councilman Allen. I prepared an amendment, and I'm going to distribute this. This would kind of clarify some of those points.
Okay.
So I will give you a moment to look at that. I'm sorry.
Mayor,
Yes,
Could
Council
you
Lady
make-
Smith?
thank you. Would you make sure that we get a copy of that?
Yes, ma'am. We'll make sure, we've got some laying on your desk. We'll make sure it gets to you by the weekend.
Thank you, sir.
But if you will allow me, or I would entertain a motion for an amendment, for this amendment. I'll make the motion and ask for a second. And then I will walk you through the amendment, which I think will add clarity to what we've got before us. And I want to thank you for considering this amendment to Councilman Allen's budget amendment in favor of increasing the funding to our city's Human Relations Commission. The commission was established back in the 80s in response to growing concerns about the way our neighbors of different races and cultures were being viewed and treated. Over the years, it's ebbed and flowed depending on the circumstances and the occupant of the mayor's office. But today, we find ourselves in a very different environment that needs all of us to have the difficult and, yes, uncomfortable conversation about the stain of racism in our community and our world. Recognizing, too, that we have budget challenges. My amendment, which I hope is viewed as a friendly amendment by Councilman Allen, seeks to provide funding for the material and substantial parts of the program he is presenting to us. But more than that, the amendment will create a framework to, and I quote, promote and assist in the improvement of mutual understanding and respect among all social, economic, race, gender, and religious groups within the city and facilitate communication among and between such groups. That is directly out of section 1.5-1608 of the City Code pertaining to the Human Relations Commission. Further, it is my hope that the Commission can create an environment of unity and not division as is practiced by others. So the parts of my amendment that are before you will follow his amendment that's in writing. The occupancy line, it would reduce by $2,200 because, as Councilman Erb said, rental of the city's facilities are not required. Publicity and promotion is the next line item. We would reduce that by $6,800. The rationale is that CTS is preparing an upgrade in the technology on our bus system, making electronic ads available, so there would be no need for $5,000 for city bus ads. Furthermore, the social media manager listed at $1,800 can be handled by our city's communication office, so we would not need to pay for that service. Under security and transportation, we would reduce that by $5,000 because permitting, insurance, and hiring security is not necessary if it is a City of Clarksville event, as these will be. Under staffing, we haven't done an evaluation of the duties of the part-time employee that they have proposed, nor have we developed a job description to determine what we need. And I have been talking with Montgomery County and their diversity officer, as Councilman Allen mentioned, about doing a joint venture or a jointly funded effort with the county that would improve our effectiveness for both governments. Hence, I am leaving in place the $15,000 they have listed you have listed in this budget amendment. Under business directory, I am proposing to reduce that by $1,000, which is to eliminate the need for a gig employee. This can again be handled by the city's communication staff. And studies and reports. The amendment before you lists $25,000 to pay for a disparity study. And while that's a worthy effort, we need to make sure that we are coordinating with our Human Resources Department. And then I would like to ask our Internal Audit Department to also get involved in helping shape that with our Human Relations Commission so that we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion in our city, both inside city government and outside. And as I explained to the current chairman of the commission last Friday when Councilman Norris and I spoke with her, a study is no good unless we know what we're going to use it for. And so this will take a little time to kind of craft that to make sure we're getting our money's worth, but also make sure that we are able to use the results of that study. So I'm proposing a total reduction of the $104,000 by $15,000 and a total budget amendment proposed by $89,000. There was language at the end of the part of what was distributed on Monday that said all figures are understood to be distributed annually at the beginning of each fiscal year. That, of course, is not our practice or policy. The commission will work with our HR department in regards to events, activities, and regular business for the organization as prescribed in the city code, and all city policies, including purchasing, accounting, and contracting, will be followed. So, Councilman Allen, would you consider this a friendly amendment?
I certainly will.
Okay, all right. We have it before us as a friendly amendment. Are there questions about this? Councilman Erb, does that take care of your question?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions about this amendment to his amendment?
Mayor, I'd just like to make a comment. I think that's a good friendly amendment. I'm just happy to know that we're willing to give the $89,000. I would say that I think the HRC needs to work in collaboration with our city human relations, Mr. Will White, to make sure, that the employees are trained in diversity. Also that, and I've spoke with some people about making sure that when HRC is brought about in publicizing events, that it shouldn't be a personal publication. The chairperson should always make sure that when she's dealing with city business, that it's not idolized under one person's name, because that is a committee. So that should be HRC publication, and we shouldn't make that a personal publication, because that's not the way it operates. And that's all I have to add.
Thank you, Council Lady Smith. Anybody else have any questions or comments about this amendment to Councilman Allen's amendment? Councilman Burkhart, you're recognized. I'll get to you, Councilman Chandler, in just a moment.
Thank you.
I just want a point of clarification.